So Halloween, yeah. There's a Molana in Massachusetts that got in trouble for that.
I also had a Halloween program last year, but I didn't get in trouble because I'm not under the
You're not
I'm
under
under
contract.
contract, but
A different contract.
a different contract.
Bismillah, welcome to Savage Sufis with your host, your main man, Wakil, and
Bilal, welcome to episode 3. Intro to how to conversate.
is this not the Jinn one, Bilal?
Oh, no, it's not nighttime. Remember, we don't want to get afraid.
Okay. So we'll save that one for another day. That's a little bit of a teaser for you guys.
Yeah. You know, Wakil's a tease.
Tell Anas that was like 15 seconds in. The last time you did in 10 seconds. So
Yeah, I really held the jokes in for his wedding speech. He should be thankful.
yeah. So I just want to start off just thanking everyone who's been listening to us. It really means a lot, and I think Bilal knows himself and myself as well that, you know, we are willing to speak to even one person, but that so many people showed up and listened to it. You know, I'm very thankful for that, and it's a good start so far, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it's phenomenal. I mean, just looking at the stats, we've got people listening from even like Trinidad and Tobago. We had someone from the Emirates. I know one of my friends from Macedonia.
We're popular in Canada.
Yeah, we even had Canadians. Can you believe we had Canadians?
So people want to hear something. We might not be a cup of tea for everyone, but you know, we're enough chai to go around.
Yeah, whether it's matcha or doodh patti or what I got tonight. Oh, the orange blood rooibos herbal tea blend again.
Oh, that's good. Okay, so we decided to do intro to having a conversation, right? Or how to conversate or converse.
Yes, I went ahead and just went with how to conversate, or intro to how to conversate, because I didn't think that conversate was a word, and apparently it is a word.
Yeah, it's like one of those weird words that like teachers correct you for, even though it's correct in itself, but
Yeah,
they want to be more fancy with converse.
yeah. I always thought it was converse, so I was one of those arrogant people, and then I was corrected by someone who used it, and I was like, I don't think that's a word. And then I looked it up, and
Woe behold.
yeah,
And,
we'll get to that.
and I think that's actually like I think that's a good start to how we should actually have like conversations, because sometimes we think we're right, or we have a formed opinion already, and we're not willing to change or listen to somebody else's opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we see this nowadays all the time, right? This is not even limited to, I mean, of course it's not limited to personal conversations, but it's even crept into our personal conversations. It happens on a national, international level. Everyone who comes into a conversation, it's like they're coming into a debate. Like they have their opinion formulated already that they're right, and they just need to prove themselves to themselves, not even the other person.
Yeah, and I think like um, just because we put everything out, like especially us, we have a podcast now, right? Or any other type of social media, it's kind of like a megaphone blast. Even when it's like personal between two people, it's almost like we're broadcasting to an entire audience. And I think that mentality really crept in into our society now.
Yeah, and unfortunately, because a lot of the conversations don't happen face to face or even over the phone, they happen via text, or even worse, like if you have a Facebook post or a Twitter post or an Instagram post, like that's your opinion, and then your words can be taken out of context, even if you make, if your phone makes an autocorrect error and you spell a word wrong, which you have never spelt incorrectly ever before, then someone will take you to task for that. It's really unfortunate.
And the way that like screenshots and conversations happen all the time, like, you know, we always send the screenshots. That's
The
spill the tea. No, spill the tea. Come on.
screenshots are Exhibit A and B and C and D.
Yeah, and then you shorten it, and then you modify a little couple of things here and there. So
Yeah,
yeah, we have a deficiency now. We have a deficiency. We don't know how to talk to each other anymore.
yeah, or listen to each other.
And that's like that's definitely um, imperative, very important uh, to grow and develop as a normal human being, which many of us nowadays are not even that. So
Yeah, Allah protect us from becoming less than human beings, because He created us in a way that we have a tongue to speak. And was it it's a saying of the scholars, right, that God has created us with one tongue and two ears. The people talk like they have two tongues and no ears.
yeah,
We're coining terms left, right, and center. Right.
yeah, we're gonna be trendsetters, but don't worry, this can it's gonna happen.
Okay, so let's dive into it. We started to have a conversation about how to have a conversation. We covered the basic approach that nowadays, unfortunately, because people come in to a conversation like and treat it like a debate, they already have opinions formulated in their minds. That I think is fine, because people should have an idea of what they want to talk about before they enter into a conversation, whether it be casual or formal. But the deficiency, as you kind of pointed out, was that they, or like the word deficiency that you pointed out, I think the deficiency is really that when they come into any sort of conversation, it's they only want their side heard, and
Right,
they don't even care if they're listened to. It's just that their side was heard, and they're vocal about it, and then they're like, okay, we're done, I'm going to walk away because I said my piece and I have no other part in this conversation. Whereas a conversation is an actual back and forth.
right, and I think a lot of that is just um, given the current state of events, whether it's like political, apolitical, whether it's religious, a-religious, or irreligious, um, it's just we like to hype up a main event almost. So every conversation has to be exciting, and that's part of like the society we live in now, where you have to make your life look like you're doing something all the time, and
Mm,
like the blogs and the tweets and the pictures and posts on Instagram and TikTok and all these different types of platforms. Every little conversation now has to be almost a drama.
mm.
um, and it's kind of hard to just talk to people like that in general, and people don't realize we need to interact with each other. It's going to be kind of funny because I'm going to quote Aristotle here, that we're psychosocial animals, that we need to interact with one another. So there's my Aristotle little quote there for the day.
I completely lost my train of thought. Right. So you kind of hit me hard with that, with that ancient Greek. Um, Wait, where are you going to go with that, with the quote though?
Well, the thing is that human beings, and this goes back down to our core,
Mm,
is that we are designed in such a manner that we can't be fully isolated, and our survival pretty much depends on us congregating and coming together.
mm,
We're psychosocial animals. We're designed to be in a society. And what happens now is that when everyone becomes like rogue, and everyone wants to be the alpha, and everyone wants to be the head of the conversation, they want to be head of the debate, they want to be the winner all the time, you don't have a society that functions. So we defeat our very purpose and our very nature by wanting to always be right, correct, heard, and not listen to anyone else's opinions or their feelings, or etc. etc. So that's what I'm trying to get at, is that this is the core problem of why we can't have a conversation, is that we've become dehumanized to a certain extent. We've become kind of rabid.
mm. So we've gone from being psychosocial animals to just kind of
Psycho
yeah,
animals.
exactly what I was going to say. And it's interesting that you mentioned that quote specifically from Aristotle, because Aristotelian logic, um, it talks about the way in which the human being is defined is also the rational animal, right? In Arabic, it's called al hayawan al natiq, the Natiq in Arabic comes from the root word nataqa, which means to actually formulate the words, right? But in order to actually speak words, you need to formulate them in your mind. So they need to come in some sort of order, and order has to be rational. So a human being is someone who rationally puts things together in a pattern or a form, and then is able to, you know, elucidate that via their speech. And if someone is just speaking without other people around them, then you're not really a social animal. You're just kind of, I mean, the person who just talks to themselves, or him or herself, all the time without an audience. Um, I think that I don't want to go beyond our realm of expertise, which is something that we will touch upon a little bit later on, I believe. Um, but that's a sort of mental condition, right? That's a psychological or psychiatric condition, that if we are speaking expecting everyone to listen to us, but there's no one around us to listen to us, it's a weird situation that we're in, and you actually become a psycho animal.
Yeah. And so like, even if we go back to the creation of man, and I guess this is where we take a little bit religious turn, and then probably we're going to conclude on the religious turn, is that when man was created, he was given a platform to speak, but the main thing was that the angels around him were listening,
Mm,
and what allowed uh, true growth and to identify who was what. So if we go to Surah Baqarah, in the very which is second chapter of the Quran, that God is saying that He's going to create man to be the the head honcho on earth, more or less, right? I'm creating a new creation, and He's going to inherit the earth, and the angels are actually conversing with God, right? They're saying, oh, human beings, they're going to be destructive, and there's already so much killing and massacre on the earth already. Why are you going to create this? We're actually very good creations. We can take care of all this stuff. And God's saying that I know that things that you don't
mm,
know. And that's when the human being, Adam was first created. And that's when the angels are actually forced to listen to what Adam has to say.
mm,
They start saying things, and they start realizing, wait, maybe as angels, we're not necessarily complete in our knowledge, right? We're not complete in our knowledge, because He just surprised us with something that we didn't know, we didn't expect, when He started naming all the different types of
mm.
creation. And so that's when and this is actually one of the qualities of the angels, and this is an angelic quality found in human beings. They say, Subhanaka la ilma lana, right?
Right.
That glory be to God, that His knowledge is complete, that He has all the knowledge, pretty much, right? More or less, loose translation of that. And they just admitted their own deficiency. So that conversation started off, went a complete different direction. Human beings are brought up. They listen to him for a little bit, and they realize, hey, I'm wrong. And then we see that there's a mutual understanding between the two creation
Mm.
after that. And this is like the very foundation of our conversation kind of uh, begins, or the foundation of conversation is there, because that's where we rely upon.
And this is completely, this is, you set the stage in one side, right? And this is something that I hadn't thought about before you actually brought it up. And then if you look at the converse of that, or in like an opposing situation, then when, I mean, I might be messing up the order of the events, but then when God commands the angels to bow down to Adam, and this is found, in the Judeo-Christian tradition as well as the Islamic tradition, although there's slight changes, or there's slight differences in the way that the narrations come about, and that all the angels bow down to Adam, peace be upon him, except for Iblis, except for Satan, except for Shaitan. In our tradition, the majority opinion of the scholars is that Satan, Lucifer, Iblis, was not an angel. He was another creation that had free will. That was the jinn. And I never really thought about it in this way that you had just mentioned, that when Adam spoke, peace be upon him, the angels, they subdued themselves, right? They were humble and they listened. But the reaction of Satan was not to listen, not to obey, and to think that he was better.
Yeah, and that's actually, there are two sides of the same coin, right? The very middle of it is actually having a conversation, and the other end is complete denial or arrogance and ignorance, and the other one is, which actually I think is going to go nicely into the next part, or about uh, innocent ignorance or blissful ignorance,
Mm.
right? Someone who's mentioning something without necessarily, they do have a formed opinion, but they're willing to grow and evolve. And on the other side is arrogant ignorance, where someone is very haughty and has a very strong and firm opinion, and they're not willing to
Mm.
learn at all. And so we see on the angelic side, you know, where they say subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim, that glory be to you, we have no knowledge except that which you taught us, talking about God. Verily it is you who is the all knower and all wise. And then the other side we have, which will become like the devilish, or the demonic
Mm.
quality of Satan, rejecting it, saying, I'm better than you, I have more knowledge than you. I've lived longer than you. I have way more experience.
I
I'm
already
right. Even, yeah, I already
know. Mm.
know exactly. And I think that goes into the part that you specifically wanted to talk about, was the blissful ignorance or the innocent ignorance and the arrogant
Yeah.
ignorance.
So I mean, we had talked about how the way in which we should try to approach a conversation is that we should try to learn from the conversation, because we should come at it from the perspective of, just like you were mentioning about the angels, that perhaps there is something that I will gain out of this forthcoming endeavor, this forthcoming interaction or conversation, that I might walk away with this with a new piece of knowledge, something that I didn't know from before. And that, exactly like you were mentioning, that's what, you know, simple ignorance or blissful ignorance or innocent ignorance. I like the blissful ignorance, um, but at the same time, not all ignorance is bliss, right? Innocent ignorance. I mean, our the scholars of the Islamic tradition, they categorize the two types of ignorance: the innocent ignorance and the arrogant ignorance, or compound ignorance, into jahl basit, which is simple or innocent ignorance, and jahl murakkab, which means literally compounded. Murakkab means something that's mounted upon something else. Like when you sit in a car, or you mount a riding animal, or you get on a bike or something, right? You've done irkab. You've like gotten on top of it. So that means there's something that you're on, right? Whereas basit is just simple, it's innocent. So the difference between the two is, the innocent ignorance is that you don't know something, and you know that you don't know something. You know that you don't know about it. And an example of that would be, like, I was just thinking over the weekend, I went to go visit some friends, and I've never really baked anything in my life, not to my knowledge. My brother bakes like brownies and cookies, but mainly from like a recipe, like, a Nestle box or whatever. But I was thinking, oh, my friends gave me some apples. Why don't I make an apple pie? So I know that I don't know how to make an apple pie. So I'm ignorant of the fact, I'm ignorant of how to make an apple pie. So to solve my ignorance, to cure that ignorance of mine, I went online and I Googled, you know, I have sugar, I have apples, I have graham crackers, because I wanted to not go and get a store made pie crust. So I Googled like how to make a graham cracker pie crust and an apple pie. I ended up not going and not actually baking the pie. So I'm 0 for 0 in terms of my baking. But that's a very, very simple kind of real world, very, very recent example of innocent ignorance, right? I'm completely aware that I don't know how to bake, and I know that the first time it will probably not come out well. So I'm in need of some sort of expertise. Arrogant ignorance would be, if I take the same example, I've never baked an apple pie. I've never baked anything in my life. I don't know what ingredients go into an apple pie, except for the fact that I know it requires apples, and I know it requires, if I want to make a graham cracker crust, I'm just going to mix the ingredients together, put it in the oven, and be like, I've made an apple pie, regardless of whether it comes out the way that I want it to, or or not. right? If I burn down the house or whatnot, hopefully that won't happen. But I mean, the arrogant ignorance, sometimes the person who's arrogantly ignorant can be correct, right? The adage goes, even a broken clock is right twice a day. Being arrogantly ignorant doesn't preclude one from being correct, but does it mean that you actually know that you're correct? Or do you assume that you're correct, right? So this is a problem. And this is actually, we had mentioned that we wanted to use there's in Islam, there's no original sin. We don't believe that there's an original sin that was committed by Adam and Eve, peace be upon them both. But rather, the original sin came from Satan when he refused to bow down to Adam out of his arrogance, out of his compounded arrogance.
And I think that compound also, like the way you can also look at it is look at a piece of coal, right? It's very dense, right? And in terms of like compounding things, when you put things on top of each other and you just keep on putting it and you compact it, it becomes very dense. And when we're talking about someone who's very ignorant, what do we call them? Dense. And so that compounding kind of translated it into English as well. And that's what we see with a lot of arrogant people. And in this case, Iblis, Satan, he did the same type of thing too. That his arrogance, and it kind of works with the coal example because that's something, you put into the fire, and he himself was a creation.
And he's
of
going
fire.
back to the fire.
Yeah, always all going back to the fire. You're gonna have a jinn program coming soon, guys. just stay tuned.
Oh yeah, so let's interject for the listeners who don't know. Jinn are, when we're talking about exorcisms and whatnot, jinn are actually the things that take possessions of people. So that's what we're going to be talking about soon, about Wakil and his amateur exorcisms.
Yeah, so I guess we should lay down more of a foundation. Human beings, we believe, are creations of clay, right? Mud, earth, water, that type of mixture. And angels are creation of light, and jinns in this particular case are creations of fire, smokeless fire. So that's pretty much the foundation of three main or primary creations that Allah created and why we're here today, or the way things are done now. So that being said, again, the coal example is that is very dense, and Iblis became very dense in a certain aspect, and he rejected what God told him. And the thing is, a lot of people also misunderstand what happens in the opening of creation, or the creation of human beings, is that they're like, oh yeah, God was consulting the angels, or God was consulting, getting opinions on what he should do or not. That's not our understanding. Our understanding is that God announced something, and whenever he speaks, it's truth, right? You don't have knowledge on this matter because they didn't have knowledge on this matter. You're going to see the great things that they do because he knows that they're going to do great things. And so when he says bow down, this is though it's a command and an action to bow down, when he says bow down, it's a truthful statement because you're only going to bow down to that thing that is better than you. And that rejection of truth, and this goes into ourselves as well, is that we refuse to bow down to the truth. We continue to be in our ignorance, and what happens afterwards, and I don't know how we even got to the direction, because me and you, we speak about what we're going to talk about beforehand.
Don't give away all our tricks and whatnot, our tricks and treats.
We can't look like we're doing this completely randomly.
If people thought we were doing it completely randomly, then it would be a treat, right? But now we're tricking the people. So
Halloween's coming up.
Halloween.
Halloween, yeah. There's a Molana in Massachusetts that got in trouble for that.
I also had a Halloween program last year, but I didn't get in trouble because I'm not under the.
You're not
under contract, but.
Different contract.
A different contract.
So, so the opening and the foundation, because he rejected truth, Satan rejected truth, Iblis rejected truth, and he ends up getting banished, and he ends up being away from the mercy of God. And the conversation is actually very funny because he immediately assumed, right? If you go to the actual passage, he immediately assumed that there was no forgiveness for him, and he didn't do the humble thing or the action of humility to just be like,
Yeah,
I
he
just
didn't
said
acknowledge
something
his
stupid.
wrong.
I'm sorry.
And this is a
He didn't acknowledge that it was wrong, nor did he ask for forgiveness. God says you're banished, and he says, you know what? I want to live till the end of time.
he just said, yeah, fine, I'm gonna walk away. And there's the lack of desire for reconciliation, a lack of desire for like actually arriving at what is true. And I think this is the way, if you don't mind me interjecting back, a way for us to come back to what we wanted to talk about, because I think we we did kind of go off on this path that we didn't really intend to. So I'll admit that we did do a little bit of planning, but we kind of went off on a tangent. That although Satan was he like the truth was presented to him, he refused to accept the truth, right? And this is, I think, what we wanted to get to, that everyone wants to come into the conversation pushing forth their point. And you might, we might come into, like, you might come into the conversation thinking that your point is the truth, like it's your truth, right? And this is another issue maybe we can talk about some other time. Everyone has their own truth with a lowercase t, right? But no one wants to submit to the capital T, Ruth, right? No one wants to submit or concede to the capital truth. They just have their many own lowercase truths, and they think that that's right. And people might bring their rational arguments. Like, I mean, if we think about it, the argument that Satan says is, he says, I'm better than him. I'm better than Adam, peace be upon him, because you created me from fire and you created him from clay. Now that is a rational, logical argument, right? Because in the psyche of Satan, he's thinking, okay, fire is more powerful than clay. Fire can mold clay. Fire can burn clay. So therefore, it's better than clay. That's a lowercase t truth, rational argument that could possibly hold. But when in comparison, when put into contrast with the capital truth, then he refused to accept having been defeated, because the purpose of coming into that conversation, into that engagement, was not to learn. It was to just try to put his position forward.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what we're all a victim to nowadays, right? Because our personal truths, we hold them very high and mighty, and this kind of like how we started the conversation as well, is that our society is just reinforcing that. You're special, you're very unique.
In the words of our beloved Sheikh scholar Maulana Hamza Wal Maqbool, you're a special snowflake. Everyone's a special snowflake.
Everyone's a special snowflake, and there's truth to that too, right? Everyone is unique. Everyone is entitled to their opinion. Everyone does have a special quality within them, and that's where, like, the word "but" important, that it's a conditional statement, right?
1D.
What? One. So that's why it's a conditional statement, right? Because we are all unique and we're all entitled to our opinion up to a certain point. It's a conditional statement where we all can grow and modify and be better, so on and so forth, right? If your whole life you're thinking 2 + 2 is 5, in front of 4, you guys should understand that your intellectual submission is necessary, especially when everyone else is telling you that this is correct, or so on and so forth. And it's not an illness for this generation versus that generation. It's just found everywhere, right? It's just a little bit more apparent nowadays, because you try to have a conversation with someone and they already have their truth in their mind, and they're already willing to debate and fight their point no matter what, even in front of correct opinions or logical opinions, and so on and so forth. And that ignorance and arrogance is such a problem, because people who actually have experience and knowledge in a particular field, you're completely debunking them for no reason. And this goes back to, like, oh yeah, for example, your recipe example. I read an apple pie recipe once in my life. I know how to do it a million times over. Or I Googled all the symptoms for cancer, and this is my opinion. You have cancer versus experienced medical opinion or experienced chef or cook's opinion. You did something once or you experienced something once, you made an opinion on it, but that does not mean you're a master of that field, and that does not mean that you should disrespect or dishonor someone who does have experience in that. And uh, this kind of goes into like, hey, I have a question and I want an answer to it. Who do I go to? How do I get that answer? And how will that answer be given to me? So this is something like a lot of scholars also deal with, that when they learn how to decipher a question, whether it's an accusation against them, whether it's I've already formed my opinion, I just need your validation, or I'm asking you a question because I actually want to know. And that's like a very big thing and a very like uh, almost like, I don't want to say problematic, but it's a lot of trouble nowadays because scholars are here to help us out and they want to answer our questions because they want the betterment of society and humanity as a whole. But because of those people with uh,
Just call them
pre-existing
pre-existing conditions. Let's just
understandings,
get to the root.
opinions, and I
Oh,
don't
but
want
I
to call
mean,
it pre-existing. It's not a
what we're
medical talk
saying,
show.
right?
No,
Although our focus is on the religious sphere, and when we're saying the word scholar, we're generally referring to religious scholars. And the same thing applies elsewhere. I mean, the examples that
yeah,
you gave, that you camelbacked off of my apple pie thing. If I were to go to a chef and say, like, I've never cooked
yeah,
an apple pie in my life, and I go to an experienced chef or an experienced grandma who's been cooking apple pies her entire life, and I tell the grandma or the chef, like, I tell her, like, I know, or the baker, I know how to cook an apple pie. You're doing it wrong. I read a recipe off of, um, like superpanda.com. I think that's the name of the website. Or if I go to WebMD and I look up some sort of thing before I go for my physical exam, and then I start pestering my PCP with all these random questions. Well, did I go to med school or did he go to med school? Right, and the same, of course, applies to
yeah.
scholars. So then,
Religious, and yeah, and they have to decipher whether you're coming to accuse them, validate your own opinion, or actually seek knowledge. And though they want to betterment all of humanity and society and answer as many questions as they can, they are put into a corner where
yeah,
they have to deal with everybody else, right? And that's why there's like grief in the community, like, oh, why don't they answer this question when I ask them this way?
or
Well,
maybe you don't,
maybe
or
you're not
maybe the
asking it the
answer that
right way too.
you seek is not the one that you need or deserve. So this is really important, that
Or
I
looking
think
for,
that are
yeah,
really interesting that you
completely, yeah.
brought, these different types of scenarios up for the types of questions that people ask and the types of questioners. Imam al-Ghazali, Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, who was a 5th century scholar, was a 5th century Hijri scholar, so it's a 11th, 12th century Common Era, or after death, AD. He says in his book, Letter to a Disciple, or Dear Beloved Son, Ayyuhal Walad, he, in one of his letters, he talks about different types of the diseases, or the disease of arrogance being of 4 kinds. And he says that out of the 4, 3 are incurable, and one of them is curable. First, which is incurable, someone who's questioning or arguing it is out of his envy or hate. Right, so this maybe we could equate to uh, someone coming in with an opinion that they already have, and they actually have some sort of animosity toward the person that they're about to engage with. And so his advice for that very quickly is that you should turn away from that person and leave him with the sickness. And then he says the second has foolishness as a sickness, and he also is incurable. So this is the one of, like, the example of me never having baked a pie, and then going to someone who has knowledge and experience in the field, and then trying to test them. And the questioning, he says, since he does not, um, he says, this idiot in his ignorance thinks that what is a problem for him is also a problem for the great scholar, right, or the great master of the field. Since he does not even know this much, his questioning is due to his foolishness, and you should not engage in answering him. And then he says the third is someone who's asking for guidance, and everything he does not understand in the discussion of the great scholars is put down by him to the shortcomings of his own knowledge, and in his questioning, is to learn. However, he is unintelligent and does not grasp realities. Thus, you should not engage in answering him either. So, for someone, people are of different levels, of different. How can I say this nicely? Their mental faculties are endowed with different levels of mental facility, right? So not everyone's the smart sort the same level of smartness, right? And we're not talking necessarily about IQ, but we could talk about EQ, or someone could be incredibly intelligent in one area and really, really dumb in another area. And then he says, finally, as for the sickness which is curable, it is that of someone who is asking for guidance, who is intelligent, understanding, and not overwhelmed by envy, anger, the love of reputation, prestige, and wealth, and being a seeker of the straight path, and whose questioning and querying are not out of envy, obstinacy, or desire to test. This man is curable, and it's permissible to engage in a reply to his question. In fact, replying to him is an obligation upon you.
Dang, Bilal, Bilal, dang, Bilal,
So the
that was
one thing
deep, bro.
that
That was,
this will be the last point that I might mention, or the last quote, just to I ended off with a cool quote, because I used this
yeah,
yesterday in a conversation with someone, that the great jurist Imam Shafi'i, may Allah have mercy on him, he said in a couplet of poetry, he said, "Mutarakatu safihi bila jawabi ashaddu ala safihi min al jawabi." He said, leaving a fool without an answer is harder on the fool than giving him a reply. Right? So sometimes, when people are just kind of talking and talking in their own echo chambers, and you don't want to really address them, right? But they keep bugging you. Sometimes it's better just to just leave them alone. Not worth your time.
yeah. There's a contemporary scholar, Musa Ferber, that my brother sent to our group below. That he speaks about that person, right? So Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah, right? Allah have mercy on him. He was mentioning that the one that comes to you that doesn't really care about his status or his education or his background or all those different types of things that might lead somebody towards ignorance because they're afraid of their pride being hurt. Musa Ferber, he brought an example of a person that says, I have a PhD and I cite PhDs. I can't be wrong when it comes to anything I say about Islam. And so, and he signed it off as, the Dr. Humble PhD. So it's yeah, you're qualified in a certain field and you might be excellent in that. You might be number one in that. But it's like saying the smartest person in the world to go play football, which is also strategic and very smart and takes a different faculty, and expect him to excel. It's like telling a fish that swims normally, go climb a tree, and that fish actually believing that he can climb a tree. So everyone has their spheres in which they are, which they thrive, but doesn't mean that you're going to thrive in every sphere. And just because you have that status or that background or even that praise in a specific field doesn't mean that it translates over to all other matters. And so that's why I have a PhD and I know everything about Islam. So I have a valid opinion. I have a degree. I know what I'm doing. I have a medical license, a bar.
XYZ University.
Yeah. I'm an Esquire,
Yeah, I think staying in one's lane, and hopefully we're trying to, at least for us, we're just trying to have a conversation, and I think we're trying to do our best in staying within our lanes, only speaking about topics to the extent which we actually have knowledge and experience, but also we're of course open to. I mean, if we were to say that we are the authoritative voice on anything that we're talking about, we'd be very hypocritical with regard to what we talked about in the beginning of this conversation.
Absolutely. And I guess that's pretty much like the foundation that we want to lay down for our future topics, is that basically that in order to have a successful conversation, with someone, you have to have that willingness to listen, to learn. Whether or not your opinion is going to change, that's a different fact altogether. You're, like I said, you're entitled to your opinion, but you shouldn't also discount what other people have to say. And none of us are perfect. We can all make mistakes, but if we are closing that door to other people's opinions and ideas, and especially people who have experience, we're only dooming ourselves, right? It's only going to get darker into a worse place, and we'll have no direction, no guidance at all. And that's really important, especially with some of the other topics that we'll be talking about in the future, like how to address controversy in a community. And sometimes we have a cult following of a specific person or a topic, and we strongly believe in that, but we tend to sometimes we'll put blinders on, and we don't look at the facts, and we don't look at the opinions of the people who actually matter or are close to a situation, and we don't have that. So main thing is that we have to prepare ourselves first, understand where we have our own deficiencies when it comes to having a conversation. Like I think I mentioned in the last podcast that I have a problem that even though I'm wrong, sometimes I'll play devil's advocate, and sometimes that's okay, because when you say you're doing devil's advocate and going against your own opinion, sometimes you're admitting that you're wrong in a certain degree, but you don't want to take it to the degree that devil's advocate actually makes you the devil. And I think that's like a really important point, is that we have to be ready to approach conversation appropriately again, see the human side in ourselves and other people, and then maybe we can have like that proper foundation to
Yeah,
actually have
absolutely.
good
And I mean, we
discussion and
didn't even
understanding of the
breach
situation.
the aspects of having a conversation in like a calm manner, not raising one's voice, and all these other sorts of etiquettes that are kind of completely lost. Um,
Yeah, nuances, and like you don't have to hate somebody for having a different opinion. Like I think Bilal mentioned in the first podcast as well, is that me and Bilal, we don't always agree, but we understand where each other is coming from. Or if you have a sibling, brothers and sisters or whatever, sometimes they're right and you don't always agree with their decisions. And you're right, and you're giving honest and sincere like opinions or expressions into their lives, but it doesn't mean that they're evil because they didn't take your opinion, you know, or they're completely wrong because they're doing something their way. So that's another conversation in itself, right? How to actually lay down the etiquettes of having proper
yeah, inshallah, we'll
conversation
save
and
that for probably not the next
interaction
episode
with one
because we
another.
have a special guest coming through. Something that someone had messaged you about, right? In terms of like the upcoming elections and just like the entire whole political sphere. So just a little bit of a teaser that we're gonna be talking about the whole concept of voting and like civic engagement and all of these sorts of things. So we have someone who's fairly well versed in these sorts of things. I don't want to sing his praises too much, and then he'll come and say like, well, "Why did you say this? Why did you say that?" Although he's not the sort of person who would do that. I'm sorry for saying that, Mister Whoever's going to be coming on next time. But I look forward to having that conversation because it's not something that I like. I remember when you brought this up just the other day, or was it this morning? I was like, I really hate having these sorts of conversations, but I'm willing to be a listener on that end because it's not something that I'm good at, nor is it something that I have a whole lot of expertise or experience in.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if anything, it's one thing is that it was requested from people, and it's kind of contemporary, especially given the current climate, and people are confused about how involved they should be or not in the political spectrum and the political. Does it even matter? Is it halal? Is it haram? Uh, those type of questions come about, or you know, do I have to choose between the two parties? Do I have to
Mm.
uh, say that my allegiance was with this person or that person? So tune in for the next one.
Yeah,
We're gonna have very interesting conversation, hopefully, and he's gonna be our first guest. So that's a very
yeah.
big topic. That's a very big milestone for us, especially early on. And
We wanted to ask for people's feedback in the episode description or show notes or whatever they're called. We have our email, savagesufis@gmail.com, if you want to just write us any sort of feedback. feedback or suggestions or whatnot, we welcome that. Then also, if you go to the Anchor website, it allows you to leave us a voice note feedback. And if you leave something that we think is interesting enough, maybe we'll feature it during our podcast. I don't know how ratings work just as yet because we're very new on this. But if there's some sort of rating, and if you like what you hear, and if you'd like us to improve, then we appreciate that. And then, of course, sharing and support however you can and however much you'd like to. We're not going to force you to do anything that you don't want to do. We're not those sorts of people. La ikraha fi din wa la fi podcast. There's no compulsion in religion nor in podcasting.
Podcast.
Yeah.
I guess we'll just close up on that one. Remember, guys, if nobody loves you, I love you. We'll see you on the next one.